Hey guys, this is Be Good Builds, or otherwise known as Braden, and in this first video I'll be showing you how you can assemble your own PoE powered outdoor enclosure for SenseCap rack, minted miners, or any miner really that accepts a 5-volt USB connection. Now, this setup is great if you want to put your antenna up high, but don't want to run a long cable to it and risk major cable loss. I have linked all the parts below to the build and should mention that the Amazon links are referrals. If you want to get your hands on something like this but don't have the tools, they are also available on my website, begoodbuilds.com. There I have tons of other Helium type resources, especially evolving around off-grid mining. So if you have interest in that, please give the site a visit. Without much else to say, let's get into the build. So to get into our tools, we're going to start off with some measuring tape and a marker. This is how we're going to draw out our lines to decide where we're going to make our holes. So those are important to have if you want to make your stuff look nice. Next up, we're going to have a drill. Pretty straightforward. Going to need this to cut and drill the holes. To accompany that, we're going to have a step drill bit and a 3.5 inch hole saw. This is important because that's going to be used to cut a big hole for our vent. As you can see, I have 4 vents written on there. Next up, we got an impact driver, just a simple impact driver. You could probably also get away with one using a screwdriver for this step, but it's good to have. Next, we have some assorted screws. You're only going to need 2 screws at a minimum. And next, an enclosure, and obviously that's a big part of it. That's followed by a PG19 cable glands. That's where your Ethernet cable is going to feed in through the box, so that's good to have. Next up, we have our 80mm USB fan. So this guy's going to work on a standard 5 volt. Obviously it's USB, so that's how it'll work. And that fan is actually going to attach to this exhaust vent, so we're going to be blowing air out of the enclosure. Next up, we have our air intake vents. So these are 2 little guys that you're going to have to get via poly case. And so that's going to be followed by an SMA male to end female bulkhead. This is where our antenna is going to plug into, and it's going to run directly out of the box. Next, you're going to need an injector. So I have a 30-watt PoE gigabit injector. Next, we got a 2-way Y cable, and connected to that 2-way Y cable, we're going to have these 2 connections. It's a Type C and a USB-A female. Followed by that, there's an Ethernet cable. You're going to need 2 of those, likely, Cat5e, and a 5-volt PoE splitter. Now that we got our tools together, we can start our build. So step 1 is going to be the fan and vent. So this is going to be our air exhaust vent. So this is going to be just blowing hot air that's built up inside of the enclosure out. So as you can see, I'm going to start by just measuring out the center of the front of the enclosure, the door itself. This is just a rough estimate I do. I don't really pay too close attention to how nice my measurements are. I saw it was about 7 inches, so I marked 3.5. Simple does it, you know. So as you can see, I put a little dot there, and start by grabbing a drill, and this is where we're going to utilize that 3.5 inch hole saw. So you can tighten that up and begin drilling. I should also mention that since this is going to be our air exhaust vent, we're going to want to put that hole near the top of the enclosure, near the top end. The reason for this is because the hot air that's going to be in the enclosure is going to build up at the top, and that's where we're going to want it to vent out, right? If we're going to have our exhaust vent be at the bottom, then the colder air is going to vent out first, and we wouldn't want that to be the case. So once you've got your hole removed, right, you can go ahead and put that vent inside just to sit there for a moment. We're going to now take 2 screws. You can use the Assorted Screws kit, or any 2 screws you have laying around, as long as they'll fit adequately. We're going to use them to fasten the fan to the locking nut. So you take these 2 screws, and there's holes both on the locking nut and on the fan. And so you'll see shortly here that I'll end up screwing the 2 together. The plastic should bind around the screw, allowing the fan to stay nice and tight and connected to it. So also keep in mind that these fans have a direction that they blow the air out of. So somewhere on the fan, on the fan's plastic, you might see ingrained in it, there might be an arrow, and that's supposed to indicate which way air is supposed to blow out of the fan. So we want to make sure that since this is our exhaust fan, that the arrow is pointing outwards, as in air was actually going to blow out of the vent instead of being sucked in, right? So make sure that the orientation is correct when you do this step. Now that you've gotten those two attached together, you can go ahead and take that locking nut and screw it onto the threads of the vent that will be exposed on the inside of the enclosure, and this is going to lock the two together. Alright, now that we have the means to blow air out of our enclosure, we're going to have to create the means to get air into our enclosure. So we're going to be working on our air intake vents. So in this video, I actually only put one on. It's preferred that you do two. That way you have adequate airflow throughout the box. Only one isn't going to suffice. It might cause a negative pressure effect, a vacuum effect, if you will, inside of the box. So as you can see, I just used the step drill bit and whittled it down until the threads of the air intake vent fit into the hole. So that's it for that step. Once you've got that done, you can just tighten the thread on the inside of the box and you'll have your air intake vent. This next step is going to be the PG19 gland. So this gland is going to be for our Ethernet port, or to allow our Ethernet cable to feed into the box. So real quick here, I'm going to just get a rough estimate of the middle of the box just so it looks a little bit uniform, right? But once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did with the air intake vent. I'm going to use the step drill and drill out a hole that will fit my gland. So now that I've popped in the gland through the hole that I just drilled out, I'm going to go ahead and take the locking nut and screw it on so it's tight and not going to go anywhere. And that's it for the PG19 gland. So this next step I kind of skipped over because it's so similar to the last two, but this step is your bulkhead. And all you're going to do for this one is the same pretty much as the last two. You're going to drill out a hole through the top of the enclosure using your step drill bit, and then fasten your bulkhead to the top. And that's pretty much it for that one. So this next step is our internal assembly. So we're going to be taking all of the components and putting them into the box, since the box is now in a ready state. So all I did right here is I took some Velcro adhesive, stuck it to the side of the sense cap, and now I'm going to stick it to the side of the enclosure. This way it kind of just free floats and it looks kind of cool in my opinion, but it also just keeps it out of the way. That way I can run wires from the back, and since it's velcroed in, I can also remove it whenever I need to easily. So as you can see, now that I've stuck it in there, I'm just wiring up the bulkhead to the antenna, or to the sense cap itself. So I should mention, although it is optional, I love using this Velcro adhesive stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that in the parts list down below as well. Again, it is optional, you don't have to stick your stuff in there like this, but it is a great way to mount stuff. So it will be in the parts list as well. So next up, I'm going to be grabbing that PoE splitter like I just showed, also sticking it to the side of the box. So once I throw that in there, I will get that hooked up to the sense cap using this little Ethernet cable. This is Cat5e. I think this is about a foot long cable. If you can always use smaller cables to make it look nice, but that is up to you guys. Now in this next part, we're going to be taking that Y cable finally, and accompanied by that, you're going to use that USB Type-C to DC jack and that USB-A female to DC jack, and both of those are going to be connected to the ends of the Y cable. Now once you've done that, you can take the DC jack connection that came with the PoE splitter and plug that into the remaining end of the Y, and then your last connection is going to be plugged into the PoE splitter itself. Once you've got all that wired up, you can take that USB-C now and plug it into your miner. In this case, it'll be the Sense Cap. Once that's in there, you can take the USB-A and plug it into the fan's USB port. For step 6 is the antenna. This is an extremely quick and easy step, although I do want to mention this is something else I did not put in the parts list, although it is because it is optional. This would be some dielectric grease. So I am just applying a little bit of this to the inside of the bulkhead. Dielectric grease is great for keeping moisture and I think dust, but mostly just moisture, I'm pretty sure, out of this RF connection. So it would keep it from corroding, for example, is the biggest takeaway. So again, this is an optional thing, but it's highly, highly recommended that you do this. To conclude this tutorial. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I hope it wasn't too hard to follow. This was my first video on this channel, especially in my first DIY video ever, I guess I should mention. So hopefully it wasn't too hard to follow. If it was, or if you have some issue with the build, please do leave something in the comments and express that opinion to me. I would highly appreciate it. I'm trying to always make these better, and I would love to hear some feedback. Now again, this is only part 1 of part 2. In the next part, I will be showing you guys how to put together and fabricate the hardware needed to mount this box to your pole or mast at home. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.